Hello, dear listener, and welcome to this week's episode of the Gestalten podcast. My name is Martin Groschwald, and before we start introducing the guest that we have on for this week, a small apology from my side. We tried to get all of these things out a little bit quicker than usual, but it's been busy times for us. It's been busy times for the guest we had on board. So with a little bit of a delay, we are now introducing Stefan Rosén, who is the Senior Vice President for Lynk & Co Design based in Gothenburg in Sweden. And obviously Lynk & Co has made a little bit of a splash over the past few years as a new brand, obviously coming out of China. And they were always being looked at as a very brand directed company. And so I invited Stefan to join us for this conversation, and we will talk a lot about branding. We will talk a little bit about branding and experience and how from their experience or from his experience, this has made an impact on the design, what we see nowadays on the road with Lynk & Co. So enjoy it. It was very good fun. He was super open in, his problems and his issues that he had in the process, but also about the really great challenges and really good fun what he had in the whole thing. I think a lot of people can learn a little bit from something like this. So enjoy the conversation with Stefan Rosén, the Senior Vice President of Design for Lynk & Co. Enjoy and let's go. Hello, Stefan. Welcome to the Gestalten podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on board and a very warm welcome to you in Gothenburg, Sweden. How are you?
I'm fine, and thank you very much for having me.
Lovely to have you. And we want to talk a little bit about branding today because you have been an integral part and, now being, of course, the leader for design of the Lynk & Co brand. We want to talk a little bit more about branding and not just necessary for Lynk & Co, but something a little bit bigger in that kind of senses as well. So let me jump right into this. For you as a designer, how would you define branding or a brand of a vehicle?
Oh, wow. Like you say, let's just jump right into it, right? I mean, this is, of course, a huge question. And it's of course not a very easy one to answer, but I would try to simplify it a bit and say that I think it's all about identity. I mean, it's like if a company or a product were a person, who is this person? What's the personality? And you try to sort of build up a character, you could say, and create this personality. And I think that's a nice way of thinking about it. And you really would like to create a nice person that is a likable person, and but of course has its unique traits, and you really want to get to know this person better.
And if we combine this with, let's say, the complexity of a product and the combination and to use this personality with the product, what are the big challenges behind when we talk about a car or a vehicle and starting something from scratch? Because I can imagine, when we talk about a brand and it's maybe something a little bit smaller, I don't want to say it's less difficult to build that, but of course, with the complexity of a product that we see nowadays in the car industry or in the mobility sector, when you had that kind of job to start, like what did you do? Were you just panicking a little bit and said just like, oh crap, like we need to start a car brand in that sense? Or how do you start something like this knowing the complexity of a vehicle is almost second to none in any kind of product that you can develop?
Well, yes, I was panicking. I will just start with that, because you also felt, of course, a huge responsibility here to get it right, because you're not sitting on and spending your own money. It's someone else's money, and it's a huge thing, a huge investment, of course, behind everything. So you really feel that weight of the shoulders on your shoulders. But what I would like to say is, the thing is where it makes it very unique in automotive industry, I would say, is first of all, like we said, is expensive products, but it's also hugely competitive. There's so many out there, and you just have to walk into basically any street in a city or any busy highway or whatever, and there's cars, streaming down. And in order to sort of stand out in that crowd, you have to come up with something different, basically. So that's where this uniqueness come into play. And we realized very quickly, and we also had some market data on that what we call the face of the car, the front end of the car, is the most important, to be honest. And it's a bit like picking out a face in a crowd of people. What makes you sort of being attracted or drawn to one particular face? It needs to stand out. It needs to have some unique traits. And that's what we really started focusing on when it came to how we were to sort of design this and illustrate, you could say, this new identity, this new personality. So we spoke a lot about the sort of the emotion this face should evoke and express, and we wanted it to be different from anything else out there. And I would say, since we had our Chinese owner, Mr. Li Shufu, or Eric Li, as he now wants to call himself. Eric Li came to us and he said, I don't want this to just be another car. I want it to really stand out from the crowd. So that was one of the few things that we had as a brief, and we took that to heart and started talking about this personality, this person standing out from the crowd. But like you say, it's a very complicated thing with a lot of things you have to meet. There's legal requirements, there's PED Pro, there's vision angles for the drivers, there's cooling of the engines or whatever. There's aerodynamics, all these things, of course, makes the cars in the world starting to have to fight with the same issues. That's why they tend to be a little bit similar. So finding those traits where you can find your own identity was very important for us. So we actually said, let's really make sure that we have a new unique face. And we also did not want to make the identity rely on the sort of the technology in terms of the engine and all these things, because we know that this is shifting, this is changing. Even though our first car that we designed was with a normal petrol engine, albeit with hybrid versions, but we knew that this is going to change over time. So we did not want to put the identity too much into the grill of the car, put it like that, or the big air intake, which normally has been sort of historically the reference to the engine and to the brand. So we rather wanted to put the identity and the face of the car on the body. So we talk more about the design of the car, because this technology is not really what separates you anymore. You could say in the industry.
Yeah, and this is where it gets interesting now, because obviously you started a brand in a time where the digital factor has become omnipresent. Everything is done with a phone, everything is done via an app, everything is somehow interconnected to each other. So when we see more traditional brands trying to move into this digital space, try to move, let's say, the car into mobility. We see new kind of systems of how the car is being used, sharing, subscription services, all these kind of things. How did you include that right from the beginning in this job of let's do a new brand? Because I'm pretty sure, and obviously looking at how quickly China has evolved over the past 10, 15 years as well, it probably wasn't enough for you guys just to say, like, we do another car. There needs to be this new input in there as well. And how did that affect of what you do? Did you, in terms of inspiration for branding, did you stay more within the car industry? Did you look what other companies outside of this industry are doing? Or how important was this kind of cross functionality that we see nowadays for you to build the brand?
Very, very good questions again. But the thing is that we, of course, had the task also to do a car, even though there's so much more than the car. So we did not want to forget that it is a car there as well, and it had to have a strong, unique personality. But the fact, like I mentioned, that there's so many competitors out there, which all have a history and a heritage. We came into this with no history and no heritage. So of course we could start building up something quite different. And we intentionally wanted to stay away from the traditional heritage or the traditional automotive heritage. So basically, a lot of the decisions we took along the way was to make sure we stayed away, you could say, from the automotive industry. But at the same time, we did not want to create something completely bonkers and alien. It still needed to attract normal consumers, put it like that. So of course it was a bit of a balancing act. But when it comes to this digital experience, I think this was part of the setup, and one of the, I would say, important aspect that that really made a difference to us was when we were talking about how this car is going to be portrayed and sold, or how does the consumer get hold of it, and how does that purchasing or require this car, how does that process look like? And we wanted to make that as simple as possible, and this was actually part of the deal right from the beginning. So if you go in and order almost any car today, you go in and you maybe go and configure it on a website page, or you go straight to a dealer. But there's so many choices to be made along this way, and it is a difficult process, to be honest, and it is a bit of a hurdle to get over. Because you also get scared. Did I miss something? Will this be a great combo? Will I be able to sell this later with this color that I like today, etc.? There's so many sort of questions which are sort of all putting a brake on your decision to actually go ahead with this car. So then we said, well, let's make ready set combinations, so we don't have too many choices. So we have completed cars basically, and you just pick one from a few options, and you just pick one off the shelf. And there's a few advantages with this. One is that there's less to choose from, and hopefully they will already be in stock. You could get your car immediately. Because you don't have to wait for how many months for just your car to be built. But the other thing, and this was a great advantage for us as designers, we can put together color combinations unique and specifically for one car. You don't have to make sure that each deco and each body color works with each other, if you know what I mean. Because that has a tendency to honestly dilute these expressions. So you can be much more expressive.
Yeah. And so what I would say now is, how many arguments did you have with marketing over these discussions? Because I can imagine for them, they will come in and say like, oh, if we have more choice, we can probably make more money out of this and all these kind of things. But combined obviously with the fact that the car started in China, similar to the US market, is very much straightforward. I buy a car, I want to have it the way it stands there as well. How is a discussion with marketing going like that? Because this was, I think, from a European perspective, is something that not a lot of people actually do, to kind of limit the selection to make this life easier. So for you guys as Europeans in Sweden, how long did that process take? How many discussions? How many headaches did you have over these kind of conversations? Because it probably is a bit more radical, and also to your design colleagues, just to say, just like, look, let's focus on a few things, but do them good, rather than just to say we do a lot of stuff and maybe do it on average to focus on what we can do best.
Yeah. So a simple answer to your question is surprisingly easy, actually. Because in China they don't really have the same culture of order and waiting for your car that we have here in Europe. So they go into a dealer and hopefully want to sort of drive off with that car immediately. So they pick from the lot. Very more similar to how purchasing is taking place in US. So that was surprisingly easy, actually. But I would say this whole discussion was happening before we even had the go-ahead that we would even build our own dealer network. Mm-hmm. So we were actually focusing on an online purchasing right from the beginning. But somewhere along the line in China, they decided, well, okay, let's make a dealer network anyway. But a lot of these decisions had then already been taken, so it was surprisingly easy.
From what I find interesting, of course, is like you're talking about branding as is the most normal thing in the world, but you obviously come from a more traditional car background. You've done interiors, of course, in the past as well. Mixing this together now and looking at your old self and your new self and all these kind of management responsibilities that you have right now, how did you see your designers change in this kind of process of understanding that when obviously, yes, we're doing a car, but we're also building a brand? Was there something that is completely different in the attitude that you see compared to maybe some old stuff where there was a brand already, where it was, don't get me wrong when I say this, just do a car and we take care of the branding? Because from the way you're talking about this sounds now, there was much more involvement from all these kind of people involved, such as marketing and, branding, physical design of the products as well. And it seems that the impression that you give is that the designers were much more aware of building a brand rather than just building a car.
Yes and no. I mean, we also, to be honest, normally we just started with one car. So it was also a task of we have to just design one car. The whole branding aspect was of course a sort of a parallel work stream. But we were very much influencing the people who were designing, and a lot of the decisions was based on this to sort of bring this new identity to into this new car, one car. But to be honest, we had we were very few people in the beginning, and some of the designers were really struggling because they wanted to know what car is it, what's the brand. And when they didn't know that, and we said, we don't know, this is what we're trying to define, they were very confused. So it was not for everyone, put it like that. We could really tell who was really enjoying this process and who were really struggling.
Yeah.
So of course, it it took a while for us to realize who were struggling and who were really enjoying it. And so we changed a lot of people actually in the beginning. And as we then started doing the second and the third car, I would say this is also where you start thinking into how do you build a brand in your portfolio cars? How can you create sort of a family resemblance? And I can tell you that this is a very different approach if you look at that from a Western perspective or from especially now a Chinese perspective. And this has been a bit of a head turner for me, because I always felt it's so important that you continue building, hammer in the same message into the next car and the next car and the next car. I mean, I guess one of the most extreme into that is, I would argue, is Porsche. I mean, they do the same expression no matter what car they do. But here, it's not that important. And we're trying. At the beginning we were saying no, it is important. But I have opened up my eyes now to a different way of approaching things. And I think, for instance, it could also be a brand trait to say that we are, the next car we do, we question the norms again. We do it differently next time. And that is also a brand trait, but it's in a different way. You might not see the clear red thread between the cars lined up, in the portfolio, but there's another red thread, which is different. And this is very exciting to me.
Would you then say that if we bring in this overused expression of experience in that, is that maybe it is to become a brand experience, and this brand experience, of course, changes over time because, everything develops forward, so that maybe if we talk about a brand in general, it's not about the front face anymore. It's not about the looks of the actual product, but it's more about the feeling, the emotion that the brand plays. And the product is then, I don't want to talk about trends in that kind of sense, but of course, if we look into China, things move super quick over there. And this goes then in line with what you have just said. So maybe the idea of brand is less product oriented, but maybe more experience oriented in the future too. And for designers then just to change, maybe we just need to understand what our brand experience is to then just to say, how can we develop products forward? And, we can be brave enough to throw something away that we did last generation.
Yes, and I think this is you're starting to hit the nail on the head here, because I think this is really what it's about. And where within Western perspective, you look at it could be anything from a feature to a function to whatever, and say we did it like this in the old car, and in order to keep that sort of family resemblance, we need to carry that over into the next car. But here we're saying, well, if it doesn't give you anything new, anything if it doesn't really enhance the next experience, we'll just throw it away and start with a new thing. So I mean, for you're talking about this experience. Talk about, for instance, the screens on the interior. It's a simple thing. And you go, well, we have always done sort of a landscape format that works with us. But if it comes to a point where, well, with this next car, we don't really think the landscape format works, you could then the old Western style will go, no, we need to keep the brand identity. Or the China one is like, why do we keep something that doesn't work for this car? So throw it out and put in a portrait then. What's the problem? You know what I mean? So they're much more willing to throw out things that we otherwise would sort of hold on to a little bit more dearly. And I like that. It's much more daring in a way. And of course, a lot more work for us.
Yeah, and this would be my question now. Like, obviously, you in your leadership position for a brand such as Lynk & Co, how difficult does it make your design department then to, you know, get this understanding that this will be the future, maybe for this brand, or maybe like in general? I mean, you will see both ends of the table, of course. You know, something much more conservative, something much more open-minded in that sense. But how do you think then the design team will change through that? Because you know, this goes to a conversation then further on, just to say, like, what is the role of the designer? Do we where's the department heading towards to? Because if we have these constant changes involved, are we tending towards having fixed larger terms department, or are we going to have, you know, smaller fixed teams but more people coming and going to kind of keep this revolution almost going constantly, or trying to get it going as well? Because I can see, you know, these traditional companies, you mentioned Porsche, but we can take pretty much all of the big German ones and stuff like that. Pushing something forward is very difficult because of this heritage that they have. But it might also be difficult because people have been there for such a long time that it's difficult then for them to imagine something completely new, and, you know, just to kind of break with certain kind of heritage that comes with that. Do you think that there might then be a change if this happens in a studio, in a company, that also the design thinking behind it and how a design department is run is changing to keep this brand experience alive? Because then it goes hand in hand. If you want to change the brand experience and move it forward, or, like, you know, the products behind it, you will need to have a revolving system. Otherwise you get stuck at some point.
Yes. I mean, we've been around for what is it now, 7 years, and this has been a very much of a building phase. So we've had the luxury of getting a lot of sort of fresh people in and to build up this team all the way up to now. So I would say we haven't come to a point yet where we start feeling, you know, we're just regurgitating the same ideas, put it like that. But that of course could be a danger as we move forward. But if you have a sort of an ambition to say the next car needs to look, you know, different. It needs to look fresh. It needs to look, you know, we need to push, constantly push. And if this is a mantra that you hammer into the people, they get into that as well. They like that. Or if not, then maybe they should work for one of the German ones. I mean, I don't know. But this is at least the mantra we have here. And right now, I'm quite happy with what's happening here, because we're seeing a lot of interesting ideas popping up, and that's what we are trying to encourage. And if you encourage people to come up and question all the time, then you will get that from the people instead as well. Instead of you having, oh, it's important that the next car should look like the old, but just better or whatever. So I think you get what you ask for.
So you think it's very important then from a managerial level to give this, you know, to show this flexibility, to show that there is something there that we need to encourage in the people, because it's not necessarily something that we can always expect. We need to show them that we are serious about this to be considered an option for them, because it's easy to fall into a rhythm, to be fair. You know, it's from what I always see.
Absolutely, and I mean, isn't that the most normal sort of assignment you get as a student in you know, your design school, that you're being given a brand and then you know, and say do the next one or whatever, and you have to go into do the research. What does the brand stand for? What are the design cues? And you just try to reinterpret those design cues to to do the next one. So you're much often being held back with what has been done in the past. But here, if you encourage people to say, "Oh, we want to see it differently next time." Of course, we don't want to throw away everything. There's not at all any sort of red thread. So what we're talking about is that we're talking about a number of what we refer to them as design assets.
Mm-hmm.
And you have maybe a few cues. For instance, right now we're working a lot with this the headlamp or the eyes of the car, the double line DRL on the hood.
Mm.
So that's one thing. And then we have a black band, as we call it, below with the hidden lamps. We have the parallel lines on the hood. We have the emblem there. We have these cubes for tail lamps. I can go on and on about all these sort of assets that we have. But for the next car, we say, well, let's sort of, pick a few of these assets and then reinterpret the rest. Yeah, the rest is completely free. For the next car, we maybe pick a few others, not the same assets, but we pick a few others, and then we do a new car for the rest. And I think so. This is allowing more freedom.
Combining this with the culture, I mean, you are in a unique situation that you are in Sweden. You guys are doing cars for China, particularly, but you're now coming over more and more to Europe as well. Do you see, with this kind of attitude that you just described, will we see global cars still? Will we see more regional cars? Because of course, with all these combinations that we've discussed now, it will be quite important to get this little bit of an understanding of, is this maybe a regional directive? Let's say you guys for China, can this be copied over to Europe or to the US as well? Or how in your management situation see potential kind of issues with that, or where you have to adjust the strategy or even the design for specific markets? Because I can imagine working something out and changing something very regularly is very normal in China, for example. But if you then want to come over to Europe, either you go for a very specific target group, or you have completely other challenges of then getting your customers over here, because the mindset and the kind of the way we look into things and we are used to things here in Europe is completely different. So how would you think the future will be like that, and how would you deal with that?
I come from a background where I worked at Volvo car company, and every car we did there were global. Mm-hmm. We never did any regional cars, and so that has been sort of my philosophy, or put it like that, from the beginning. And I still think, to be honest, it is possible. And I even think the world is becoming more and more globalized. I mean, people are, all around the world are connected, through the same internet. They see the same things. We're all watching the same movies, and we're becoming a little bit more one planet, put it like that. So I think you will find customers attracted to a specific brand. You could find them all over the world. Even though we're focusing right now on a lot of the Chinese consumer right now, but I don't really see a problem for any of our products to go anywhere in the world. But there could, of course, be simple things as putting a very big car into a market like Italy or Spain is maybe not so successful. That because they just don't fit into those cities or whatever. But I think so in that sense, I can see that some products become a bit more successful in different parts of the world. But I from a branding perspective, I don't see necessarily that we have to make them so different. If you create that interesting personality, as we're talking about, then it will go through to globally. And we've always been joking a little bit. It's like our car or our brand is sort of one of those cross-cultural. I mean, we have two parents, one Chinese and one Swedish, and we have created this child. But this is something you see, happening all over the world. We're becoming a lot more cross-cultural. You can go into any city in the world and find a restaurant that serves, Japanese sushi. Find restaurants who have Thai cuisine or Indian or Chinese or whatever. And this is the same. So if you just like what you see, then that's more important, I think.
Coming back to the idea of global branding, of course, and when you start something from scratch, I mean, if we look into companies, of course, we see certain kind of directives. They start in a market and they grow and they grow and they grow, and then they become global. When you started, did you always have this global ambition in your mind, so that you say, like, yes, we know we are, the child of parents from two different cultures, but we want to combine these things? Or was for you then the first step to go, okay, China, so we need to understand China, but always keep in mind that we want to go global at this point in time? Or was this, again, as you mentioned earlier, like a step-by-step system that it meant like, okay, we're building something which is firstly for China, but then, okay, now maybe it makes sense for us to push this globally, because I could imagine that in how you think about the branding and how you think about also the car, you might have had some challenges on the way that you had to overcome in the kind of context. So how was your strategy towards this idea of global branding, or at least European and Asian branding?
For when we started it was very outspoken and a clear objective that this would be a global brand. We did not set out to do a China only brand, not at all. This idea of what market we should enter when was we had originally a fairly aggressive plan. This is where Chinese are their strong suit is to change plans. But I think it was a good thing to be a little bit less aggressive, because you only get one chance of making a first impression, right? So it was very important to get established and to build the factories and make sure that we have the quality before you start entering very demanding markets. Not saying the Chinese market is demanding, not at all, but it was better to sort of start on the Chinese market. But the ambition was right from the beginning to go global, absolutely. But then we've had, of course, a few products where they always said, no, this will never go outside of China. So from the get-go, we've had not have to worry about specific legislations, for instance, in Europe, for instance. So it would be a bit of a challenge to to just pick one of those cars and say, now let's sell it in Europe. That doesn't really work. Then you might have to, that you need to have a part of it from the beginning. But from a branding perspective, definitely it was stated that it should be a global venture.
Yeah. Last question before we get obviously to the three ones that everybody gets asked to wrap up the conversation. If you look back now, you've just mentioned it's been a 7-year journey for you guys as well, and if I were to ask you, okay, let's start all over again, and we talk about branding and, how you would set up, I'm pretty sure, like, in each kind of process like this, there are always ups and downs. But is there anything where you say, okay, maybe this is something that if I would do it again, I would do differently, something that I have learned over this process where we could have done something in a different way that would have given us a bit more, I don't know, flexibility, time, decision making, whatever you can think of, where you say this sticks to your head and is something that you've learned the most from personally in these past 7 years?
Well, it's of course there are things maybe you regret or whatever, but to be honest, I think it would have been difficult to have done it in a different way, to be honest. But I think I'm quite happy and quite proud of what we managed to do in this journey. I would say that maybe a bit more openness and a little bit more, trying to understand the advantages of this different approach that the Chinese had. You might have, to be frank, I would say maybe I thought coming into this, I was like, okay, I know how it should be done. Let me show, basically. And do my work. Let me get on with it, and I'll show you how it's done. But of course, what I know or knew was the Western way of doing things, and I'm now become a much more humbled to the Chinese way of doing it. And I would say me sticking to, or us here, maybe I shouldn't just say me, but us sticking a little bit up to what we believe in has been a good thing, because it had also forced the Chinese a little bit to we have to sort of find the common middle ground. So we're trying to find what's the positive aspects of their approach and what's the positive aspect of our approach, and vice versa, to find sort of a best way forward. And I would say this experience has been super humbling, but also fantastic. So I would say that right now I know so much more about developing cars than I did before I started with this. And having a different mindset, completely different mindset, has been a great thing. So if there's anything I would, regret, was maybe not being a little bit more open and humble to that already from the beginning. But to be honest, maybe the fact that I wasn't humble also meant that we had to find that sort of common.
It's always a journey. I think, what you just said as well is, this is what I meant with, if you look back and you could do it again, I think, this humbleness would be there right from the beginning. So to find these middle grounds earlier, but sometimes, friction creates a lot of creativity and creative solutions as well. So we all need to learn in these situations that, things become more global in everything that we do. And, there's more and more Chinese car companies, or mobility companies coming into play. And, the more we grow overall, the more we also have to understand the culture behind it. I think it would be the worst thing to say exactly what you have just said, if we would just, focus on our views and think they are the best. Well, that will lead to problems inevitably, to be fair. But thank you very much, Stefan. This was really fantastic. I really appreciate all your insights. But before I do let you go, as every guest on our lovely little podcast, you will get 3 questions. 2 of them you can answer completely freely, doesn't have anything to do with vehicles or mobility or whatever. And one of them will be, of course, the omnibus car question. So question number 1, which creative person, mind, whatever you want to think, that you have or have not worked with has inspired you the most in your personal life and or career?
Wow. I wished I really spent some time to come up with the perfect answer to this question. But the thing is that I've been trying to think about those things, about where do I find my inspiration, and who do I really admire, and all these things. But it's so difficult, because I never had one of those sort of super superstar or fans that have been that are looking up to some one in particular. But there's so many, and I just like when people dare to not follow conventions, and not necessarily listening to what is expected. I mean, you could say, for instance, someone like filmmaker David Lynch, for instance. I mean, he does things where some people are just scratching their heads and wonder, who is this nutcase? But sometimes it can be just absolute magic, because that's what I think is about going to the movies. It's the magic. Yeah. Or someone like David Bowie. I mean, also a musician that doesn't care about conventions. He just did what he wanted to do, and he was so creative, and I love that. And someone like Steve Jobs, he also had this fantastic vision, and did not want to hear, how it should be done. He had that vision, and that sometimes I see that in even people I work with here. That sometimes you go, oh, this is such a creative approach. I love it, So yeah. It's difficult to name one person. It's those little moments of surprise that I love, and you could find in a lot of people.
Yeah. Question number 2: which project, again, could be anything, that you have not worked on, which you have absolutely loved to be part of?
Yeah, it's those. I would say the pioneering projects, the first of its kind. I mean, to have been there when that sort of first creative thought appeared. I mean, how did they come up with the idea of what should I say now?
You can say 2 and 3 things as well. I mean, this is why it's not an easy question. It's not supposed to be one, but it's supposed to give an insight, of course, of just where can creativity come from? What is inspiration? And it's not just about one specific thing, it could be anything for you.
Yeah, absolutely, and that is what I really like. I mean, of course, really tough challenges are fantastic to see how they are being accomplished and overcome. But I do like that those little creative sort of moments. It's like the cartoons. When you see that little light bulb.
Yeah.
Being lit. Those moments, no matter what they were, would have been fantastic to have sort of witnessed. Everything from, of course, great inventions. So, I mean, from the car itself to the iPhone or these things, would have been fantastic to have been part of those moments. But I also know that for me, those projects tend to be what you make of them. Put it like that. Mm-hmm. So there is you turn it into your own. That's what I think is most interesting. I mean, if you have to force an answer out of me, I guess I would have loved to witness probably some of those moments from through Apple's history. Maybe the first Mac probably. But the Macintosh.
Cool. Last but not least, this is now the car question. If I give you a blank check, which car would you buy?
Oh, you're not going to get straight answers from me. because I am such a sort of a multi, I really like, and I get into these, I can nerd myself into, I can spend months rummaging through ads on a used Alfa Romeo or used Caterham or one time I was into those big Mercedeses, so and I mean my dream garage would be one Caterham and next to it a big old Mercedes, and I sorry, but I just can't find the one car that does it all. I will probably cash in that check and point at the most expensive car out there, 250 GTO or something, and sell it at the auction and buy a stable of 10 crazy cars.
I'll take that as much as anything else, because I think, it shows also that, all these answers, that it's not just always narrowed down to one thing. I think there's so many things that, that affect you and that inspire you in that sense. And I really do appreciate you taking the time to record this with me, Stefan. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us. And to all of our listeners, I hope yet again you enjoyed this episode of the Gestalten podcast, this time with Stefan Rosén, who's currently leading Geely Design in Sweden and also the Lynk & Co brand for that. And as always, please make sure to rate us on whichever platform you're listening to us, if it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever. It helps us to push us a little bit. Thank you very much for this. If you have questions, of course, send us a message. We will also if you send them to me, I will share them with Stefan, so that ideally we can, get some kind of replies back to you as well, if you really would like to do that. But as always, this was this week's episode. We will be back very soon with another really cool episode as already planned. And once again, Stefan, thank you very much. And to all the listeners, goodbye. And you will hear back from us very soon again. Take good care.